time.
Is everyone ready to start the second?
Yes.
Portion?
Pull the mic close.
We
Yes.
good? Okay, yeah.
Just send an email with those three, the three of us, and we'll get you on there.
Welcome back. This is Roach Brown for the second hour of Crossroads. We come to you the first Tuesday of every month, live from the historic Ben's Chili Bowl in Washington, D.C. on the world famous U Street. Where I get this guy? Anyway, we had the Chili Bowl from 10 to 12. The first two, you can come by and have breakfast while we're doing the show. Our last guest was Congresswoman Eleanor Norton. We were talking about issues affecting D.C. Code prisoners who are confined in federal bureau prisons all over America. And we talked about some issues that really have impact and affect our lives. Now, second hour, we have a topic here: black cops remaining silent while white police officers kill blacks. We have two other guests who are scheduled to come. I guess they're running late, so we'll go ahead with what we have. But before we start, as usual, we're always over what we call the grapevine. All right, Mike, give it to me. The grapevine. Rob, let me know when. Here we go. The grapevine. Maryland leads as prison populations continue to decline. In 2017, the U.S. prison population dropped below 1.5 million people for the first time since 2004, according to a new report by the nonprofit Bureau Institute of Justice. A decline in several states with large prison populations, including Maryland, Louisiana, and Illinois, is responsible, along with a drop in federal prisoners. Maryland saw the largest drop, with 1,916 people exiting state custody, representing a 9.6% decrease, according to the report. Researchers credit sentencing and other criminal justice reforms that have passed in each of the states in recent years for the decline. Florida's Department of Corrections recently proposed new policies that would allow correctional facilities in the state to reduce their visitation hours by half, limiting opportunities for families to see their incarcerated loved ones in person. You would be hard-pressed to find many people who actually believe reducing prison visits is a good idea. Ensuring that incarcerated people maintain ample connection to the outside world is humane, cost-effective. It will result in less dangerous correctional facilities to benefit everyone. Bail. African Americans paid most of the $6.6 million in money bails in New Orleans. African Americans in New Orleans were arrested at 2.5 times the rate of whites and are less likely to be able to make bail, resulting in 87% of the city's jail population being black, reports the Time-Picayune. We're using public money to suck private money out of the poorest community to get results that are failing. I'll drink to that. And that's been what we call the grapevine, information that you can use. There's also another one that we'll talk about. A California church is flirting with an unusual social experiment to never call police again. First Congregational Church of Oakland late last month issued a declaration. We can no longer tolerate the trauma inflicted on our communities by policing. Torbett, a white church volunteer, said in front of the churchgoers who had photos of African Americans shot dead by law enforcement. The church, she promised, would never call the cops again in nearly every circumstance. This is tied into our topic of black cops remaining silent while white police officers kill blacks. We had another retired Metropolitan Police officer scheduled to come in. He wasn't able to make it, or maybe he's running late. But joining us is Kevin Copeland, a retired D.C. police officer. In fact, he was on with us last week. You the first guy we had to buck the show, man. You did last week and this week.
All right.
You must be a big boy.
That's a good thing.
And also joining me is a good friend of mine who just happened to be here, and he's up in fill in. His name is Stanley Mitchell. He's one of the Unger decisions in Baltimore. Unger is a case where 300 and some inmates were released from Maryland because of the erroneous jury instructions issued by the courts, as a result of which over 300 men and 1 woman were released. And most of these men and women did 25, 35, and 40 some years. Joining us is Stan Mitchell, who served 38 years. And would you believe he got $18 when he came out? Good morning, Stan.
Good morning, Rich. It's always a pleasure to be here and put a face on these. They always talk about people that incarcerated 30, 40, 50 years. Well, I did 38 years, and I'd like to put a human face on that.
And also we have Kevin Copeland, my man who's been here before. Man, we're talking about black cops remaining silent while white police officers kill blacks. We had I forgot his name, we had a gentleman from NOBLE, the National Association of Black Law Enforcement. He was on about 6 months ago. And we were talking about the cops in Chicago who took a knee when Colin Kaepernick knee down in the football, had the same playing of the national anthem at the football game. There are cops in Chicago who took a knee in the precinct and on the street in support of Colin Kaepernick. There's cops in New York City who did the same thing, about 35 or 45 of them, who've taken a stand not only about Kaepernick, but about the abuse and the brutality of other officers inside the department. And that's what we're talking about, what I wanted to get into today. And I know you, been a 20-year veteran of the Metropolitan Police Force in D.C., Kevin Copeland. What's your take on that?
Well, I tell you, over the years and being law enforcement, it has hardened my heart to the degree of wondering what's going on. What's going on in America? Why are we allowing this to happen? I think, you know, as far as it's a disgrace to the police department across the nation.
It is. Have you heard of anything but other members are still on the force that you know, some of your buddies or associate colleagues, what their position is about all this killing? Because I've been getting locked up since I was 8 years old, and I've never had this kind of fear in my heart. Back in the day when I was getting locked up in the 50s and the 60s, the most you had to worry about was about a broken jaw or a fat swollen lip, or they may break your arm or something. But it wasn't death, and it didn't, your whipping or beating depending on the seriousness of your offense. Now you don't even have to commit a serious offense. You don't have to commit a felony to get assaulted and get killed. How do you see this, Stan?
Well, it's my opinion that things are somewhat changed as far as law enforcement is concerned. When I was a minor coming up, your family always taught you to respect law enforcement. If you see a police officer, you will be safe. Now you flash forward to 2018, you have to have a different kind of talk with them. You have to tell them what to do when they interact with officers. You have to tell them that when you're pulled over, put your hands on your head, no matter how mad you may be, calm down. You have to let the officer know that he's in charge and be extremely respectful than the average person would have to be if you want to come back home tonight. And that's sad, because like I said, when I was coming up, the officers was considered Joe Friday, the detective was straight arrow. Nowadays, you have to have a different talk with your kids. You have to, especially young black males, you have to tell them that, hey, when the officer pulls you over, whatever he asks you to do within reason to do, because it could cost you your life. And it's sad.
As a former MPD police, and you said again, it's heartbreaking. What would you say, Kevin, to folks who are listening, and they got their kids and they going out the house, you got parents who are afraid to let the kids go to the store, go to school. If they go to school, they don't know if they're coming back home or not. What would you say to those folks who are listening, and how they should respond to the police when they come for whatever reason they come for? How would you advise or suggest a parent talk to their kids?
I would think that a lot of the parents today, again, are afraid, as you just spoke, but more importantly, I think the parents have to have that hard conversation with their kids about respect and respecting law enforcement when they approach them, and doing and obeying everything that they tell them to do so that they can walk away without even using that. My tenure with the Metropolitan Police Department from 1988 up until 2016, we had a few white officers on the department who were rough with what they did and how they did it. So through experiences and what we talked, we pulled them to the side every now and then, and we talked to them about those issues, about those situations, and learning the community and learning the people. And one of the things that we learned, it was fear. A lot of these officers and training, it was the fear and training. And I think what's happening today is there's a lot of fear that's going on in a lot of the white officers, and they're afraid. When I was on the police department, the weapon was the last thing that we took out. It wasn't the first. We always had mace, we had slapjacks, we had other things on our belts that help us to subdue an individual if there was a need to. But just to be pulling your weapon out the very first time you arrive on the scene and shoot somebody and ask questions later, I just feel that that is not the answer. So with bridging the gap between law enforcement and community is what we're trying to do, to sit down and talk to these officers and get a better insight on how they police and how they treat the community.
You know, one of the things I've noticed when you look at TV and you see the cops or reps stopping somebody and they call for backup, and when this cop is standing there talking to the suspect, it always seems that one officer will come out of the car and play Rambo. He'll run right over and body slam the individual. And when I grew up, the arresting officer was the controlling officer, and you follow his lead, and the other officers that came up will follow his lead. Now, that seems to be thrown out of the window. You can see officers driving up, and one officer been talking to a guy for 20 minutes or half hour, and everything is okay. The minute 2 or 3 other cops arrive on the scene, you got a Rambo jumping out of there, body slamming somebody, and that's something else, man, that I really have take offense with. When I grew up, they didn't body slam you. This new takedown procedure, putting your arm behind your back and slamming you down to the ground, have resulted in deaths. When they slam somebody down and you got one arm behind your back and your head is thrown into the concrete, to the hood of an automobile, people have died, have been severely injured because of this. And that doesn't seem, and they tell you, don't resist. Man, how in the hell can you not resist if somebody breaking your arm and they slam your head to the concrete? All bets are off. When you're hurt physically, you ain't worried about who's in charge, who ain't in charge. You're trying to stop the pain and get this rascal off of you. So this whole technique of this new technique of putting the arm behind your back, putting the leg on your leg and flipping you has resulted in people dying. Man, and usually just sometimes it's little light, insignificant offenses, traffic offenses. You know, people got to fight for their life and they haven't even broke the law per se. Then they're unarmed. So I've never seen, and I grew up, when I grew up, if you got killed by the cops back then, you 9 times out of 10, you had a weapon, you did something to provoke it. Now you don't have to provoke the officers at all to lose your life.
I think it goes back to training. I really do. I think it has a lot to do with a lot of training and lack of training. When the officers, a lot of these takedowns today are not taught by the Metropolitan Police Department. We were given certain specific training that we had on how to subdue an individual, even if we encountered someone on PCP or who was on drugs. We had a certain way to take them down and place the handcuffs on them.
Yes, joining us is, one of our guests is late. You can put the mic up close to you, Johnny.
Thank you, Roach.
Joining us is a good friend, attorney Johnny Barnes, former director of the ACLU, the DC chapter. That's the American Civil Liberties Union in Washington, D.C. And Johnny is our local Johnny Cochran in this town. Johnny been whipping cases and been fighting issues for the last, I think, several years, Johnny. I know you were back with Abraham Lincoln, weren't you?
Well, I apologize for being late, Roach. I was waiting for you to pick me up. You used to pick me up, take me to school. And
those days are long gone.
But you're addressing a very serious topic, and I listen to you on the way over, as I do every time you're on the air. And
It's Tuesdays.
I know, not only Tuesday, but whenever you're on there. But I was stuck in court, Roach. I apologize. Okay. And so I'll jump into the conversation. I don't want to interfere with what Kevin has been talking about, the brother, but when my turn comes, I'll jump in.
It's your turn now. We were talking about the tactics that the cops are using. The topic of the show is, why are black cops remaining silent while white police officers kill blacks? And we were talking about the new takedown procedure they use of putting an arm up behind your back and body slamming a person to the pavement or to the automobile car. And that usually results in an injury or death. And usually when that happens, you are charged with resisting arrest. How can you not resist when your arm is being twisted all the way up to your ear and your body slammed to a car? Instinctively, if you put your hand on the fire, you can holler, ow, you can pull it back.
Yeah.
If you're in pain, your body responds automatically, and that's not resisting arrest. You're trying to reduce or stop the pain or the hurt. So this is what we're talking about now, and this is not right, because it's being used in such a way as a very punitive punishment or tactic. Then when they do that, 9 times out of 10, you're charged with resisting arrest.
Absolutely, Roach. And you know, I was a combat engineer officer in the Army. My job was to build bridges and blow them up. Back when I was young, I preferred to blow them up. Now I prefer to build bridges.
Did you blow up safes, Johnny? Did you blow up safes?
No, I never
I
blew.
should have got to you.
Yeah,
but I was
I
on
never blew up safes. But the thing is, Roach, what I used to tell young people back then is, who were entering college, is that you can find yourself or you can lose yourself. But the most important thing is that you be yourself.
Yeah.
And I think what happens with brothers who join the police department, and it didn't used to be that way. I mean, the Boys and Girls Club freed a lot of young people in this town. You could go there and you could find freedom. But I think that they lose themselves once they, join that club. And the same thing with judges at D.C. Superior Court. They become different once they don those. I'm talking about black judges.
Yeah.
They join those once they don those black robes. And I guess it's a kind of peer pressure. And you have to resist it, Roach, and it's not easy to resist. But you're right. The law does protect officers who are misconduct of police officers. They protect them. And I can tell you that at an ACLU conference in Seattle, Washington, the police chief told me, he said, most of my officers are afraid when they go into the black community.
Why are they afraid? What are they afraid of?
Well, they're afraid. But whatever reason they're afraid, they shouldn't be police officers. Because you can't do your job if you go in there with a misconception, if you assume, like they did in Philadelphia, that the brothers are out for no good. If you assume that a young black man who has a certain appearance is going to break the law or will break the law, the young man with the Milwaukee Bucks, he was 6'6", big black man. They assume they need 8 or 9 officers to deal with him. I've had a similar experience. So there are these assumptions about particularly young black men that police officers make, and they're afraid, many of them, and they shouldn't be police officers. I know a lot about weapons. As I said, I served in the military, and when you shoot somebody, you intend to shoot them. Ain't no hair trigger or nothing like that or a mistake. You intend to shoot, and when you intend to shoot, you're likely to kill. And those officers should not have firearms. They should not. Brother down there wants to jump in.
I've heard this term fear used between both you officers and said that there's a lot of fear from white officers. I think a lot of that could be remedied when they make up the hiring process, that prior to you getting hired, you have to spend some time in the community that you're going to police.
Absolutely.
If white officers come in our community,
Absolutely.
live in our community before they even get the job, because
Absolutely.
most white officers, I've had interacting with white officers that never even communicated with anybody black, never went to school with anybody black. The few that had interactions, they were in the Army.
Right.
But I think it should be mandatory. Mandatory for white officers. If you're going to work in the African American community, then you should live there if it's only for a certain period, probationary period, so you get to know the people in the community, or just know black people in general.
That's a great idea.
Our culture. I think it should be mandatory.
I agree with you.
I like
Great
to take
idea.
it a step further, even with mentoring. I think a lot of the officers, what we're trying to do now is provide mentoring for a lot of the officers, white officers who come from North Carolina, South Carolina, California, New York. They come to D.C. to police, and we let them know, and we talk to them, and we have conversations with them about the community itself as a whole. And how can you build a better relationship than going into one of the schools and mentoring youth and understanding African Americans and understanding our culture? A lot of times when you talk to them, just what the gentleman just said, they haven't encountered black people before. They haven't been to school with black people. So they really don't know other than what they see on television and what they may have read and what they may have heard. And that's all small compared to what we need to do as a community. Bridging this gap, as a retired police officer, I'm coming back to D.C. where I grew up so that we can be a part of change. Change is not what you say, it's what you do. So we want to hold these officers accountable. The training I know in D.C. was great training. When I was coming out, when we had to subdue an individual, we would grab them by the back of their pants, or at least I would, and then I would tell them, you're under arrest, put your hands behind your back, and we go quietly. Now there are some individuals who would try to resist, but then you deal with them accordingly. I just believe that we have to do a better job in training. We have to do a better job at mentoring and in providing those resources for those officers so they'll understand the purpose and plan that we can do. And I believe that through that process, we can help these white officers do a better job, especially the ones that are in fear. Those guys are in fear out there, Roach. They really are in fear of the community.
I'm missing that. What are they afraid of? Because we're black?
Yeah. Black.
The big black,
The
that,
black.
that bad black man.
Yes.
Okay, we're going to take a break. Not break, we're going to make a pitch for donations. This is our annual spring fundraising drive. This is the last week. We got to get $600 an hour. We've been on for 1 hour. If you'd like to make a donation or a contribution to WPFW and Kev Crossroads or just to the station, please do. You can do it through credit card, debit card. You can write a check. We take green stamps. Anything you want to bring in, we'll take them. We need to stay on the air. Please help us. The number to call is 202-588-9739 or 1-800-222-9739. I'll repeat. 202-588-9739 and 1-800-222-9739. And I want to say again, thanks to our good friend, Mr. Alan Burris, who made a substantial contribution to us. Before we came on the air, he said he came by and made a donation. Folk, you can stop by the Chili Bowl, make a donation. You can stop at WPFW. You can see us on the street, make your check payment out to WPFW. And it doesn't come to me. We don't get paid a dime. My wife and I have been doing this show for 10 years. And we only missed 7 times in 10 years of doing this show. So we don't get paid a penny, but we need this money so we can get in and bring the word out to you. So please, look in your wallets, your pocketbooks. We need your help. If we didn't, we wouldn't ask. And if you want to hear these kind of shows again in the future, or continuation of these, please, folks, make a donation, a contribution. $10, $5, no amount of money is too small. We take all what they call in the street, all ducats. So if you got any ducats that are loose, that's not laying around, please make that donation to us. We'll get back to our guest. The topic we're talking about is, are black cops remaining silent while white police officers kill blacks? We're talking about cops are in fear. Some of the white officers are in fear, and I can't understand the fear that they're feeling. They got a weapon, they got mace, they got a dog, they got a shotgun in the car, they can call the SWAT unit, and they got all this. And the brother, that most of these guys are getting killed unarmed, and I can't see where the fear is coming from. And I can understand they didn't grow up around black people, had no experience with it. But when they killed Tamir Rice in Cleveland, after 11 seconds, the cop came up and they clocked it. He got out of his car, and in 11 seconds, he killed this little 14-year-old kid. Man, that is too mean. I mean, 14 years old. He's not, I mean, I don't care how you justify the fear. I'm afraid. People who are listening, I am afraid. I'm afraid to drive down the street. I'm afraid when I see the red light behind me, I don't know if they can pull me over if my light is out. If it's out or not out, you still can lose your life. And I've never had that kind of fear when I was a professional crime breaker. I mean, I did my thing, broke the law, and it was a thing.
You mean lawbreaker?
Oh, a lawbreaker. I said a crime breaker.
You said crime breaker.
Well, I'm a crime breaker, a lawbreaker. All amounts to the same. But I did that, and I didn't worry about getting killed. When I was doing wrong, I wasn't afraid. Now I'm not doing wrong, and I'm afraid.
You're afraid. Let me say something, Roach, that the fear factor is just one aspect of it. I think the biggest aspect is that they're protected. These officers are protected. And when the law says if you fear for your safety or life, or the safety and life of another, you can use excessive force, police officers, and they have abused that protection. Because they can hide behind it. It's a shield for them. It's a skirt for them. And so they hide behind that. They blow a young black man away, and they know the courts are going to protect them. 9 times out of 10, probably 9.9 times out of 10, they'll protect them. Let me tell you about the case just really burned me when I was with the ACLU. A young man bopping through the mall, listening to his Walkman. And you know about the case, Roach? Yeah. Listen to his Walkman, and the police officer, white police officer, said he was gyrating in a strange way. He dancing to his Walkman. So the police officer started hollering out commands to him, pulled his gun and started hollering out commands. Get on the ground, get your hands up, you know. And the young brother who had never been in trouble, straight A student, reached down to turn his Walkman off so he could hear the police officer, and the police officer sent him home. And the court said the police officer feared for his safety and his life in that circumstance. That's outrageous. And so many situations like that happen every day to young black men with these police officers who are afraid, one, and secondly, know they're protected if they use their gun and take a life of an unarmed black man. And it has to stop. And the president, to tell the Eagles they can't come to the White House because they want to draw attention to this problem in America, he's the big lawbreaker. He's the biggest criminal we've known in life, Roach. He's breaking the law all kinds of ways. And we've got to stop that, and we need to stop it now. These police officers are protected, and they don't deserve that protection.
Kevin, you've been on the force for over 20 years with MPD. You've seen situations where you know that the officer was wrong. Were you able to pull some of them over, man, and just say, hey, Jack, this ain't cool? What do you and other black officers do when you see a blatant act like that happen?
We did, and especially the rookies that came out, the academies, and they made some bad decisions, and we let them know that, hey, that is not how we do this here. I think a lot of them very receptive. They really want to know how to police, but it comes in time and training. And I just believe that I agree with the lawyer in regards to a lot of what's being done as far as the protection, because when I see a lot of these incidents on Facebook, I just say, man, that is not happening in D.C. because if it was, you would be charged because the U.S. attorneys would take that seriously. Now, across the nation, I cannot imagine why that these guys are getting away with shooting people without weapons. They're running from the police and you're shooting them in the back and saying you would fear your life. That's another aspect that you were speaking of earlier. It doesn't make sense. And so it goes back again to the training. It goes back again to the chiefs of police. It goes back to the chiefs of saying we're not going to tolerate this, that they're going to put their foot down and they're going to fire these guys and have them, prosecuted.
Stan?
Yeah, unfortunately, probable cause is the color of your skin when it comes to white officers. Yeah. Just being black is reason enough for them to stop the thing they call this probable cause. And as a result of that, like you were saying, that they know that the system is going to give them every opportunity to get away from using that probable cause of the black skin. Basically, they would like to say, I shot him because he was black, basically. And that's what they do. And they know that they got this blue line that they always talk about. It's going to protect them. And unfortunately, a lot of African-American officers, they have jobs to do. And the same individual, a lot of them don't want to go against their co-workers in blue because they might need that same person to back them up, to save their life. So it's a chalk line that black law enforcement officers have to walk. And I understand that the difficulties that they face. They have to look out for their co-worker because the co-worker may be the one to save their life. But that doesn't justify what's going on. Like I said, black skin is probable cause nowadays.
Well, the law also protects some citizens. George Zimmerman hid behind the law, used the shield of the law to send Trayvon Martin home.
Stand your ground.
To stand your ground. He killed that boy, and he intended to kill that boy, and the law protected him. We've got to change these laws, not only in Washington, D.C., but across the United States, that protect citizens and police officers in situations where the homicide is not justified, where they really don't fear, have no reason to fear for their lives, where the young black men are doing nothing except trying to survive, and they send them home. It's not right, and the law should not protect them, but it does.
How can we change this law? What can be done to bring about a change with all this? What can be done? Elect
people who are willing to make those changes. I mean, they are good officers. Kevin was a great officer when he was on the force, and there are many good police officers. But for those few, you know, the brothers shouldn't protect them. If they're fellow police officers, they have to stand up and stand out and make sure the truth comes out in these situations.
You know, Stan said a valuable thing when an officer do something and you're black and you got a white partner, you got to depend on him to save you as your backup to save your life. But when you see him do something that's racist or discriminatory and that's your partner, and you know that you got to support him because that's part of the culture, the blue line culture. It's a terrible position to be in, and knowing that you got to swallow something that you know it ain't fair or right because it's your partner or it's the practice or whatever. And this guy does something wrong. I grew up hustling or been in the street, and right's right and wrong's wrong. And I've done a lot of wrong, and I've met people who've done wrong. But when I do wrong, and I admit what I do, and I said it, the last 2 cases I was convicted of, I pleaded guilty because I did it. If I was man enough to do it, I'm man enough to take my time. But if I see somebody do something that ain't right, and even though we're hustling, man, that ain't right. Sure, I'm breaking the law, but it's a way how you break it. And you don't disrespect somebody's law or rights or human beingness for being a human being because you can. You know, and that thing of having that ability because you can, with all this militarization of weaponry. When you see the cops coming in the neighborhood now, you think they're invading Vietnam. You see all kinds of half-tracks, tanks, armored personnel carriers, guys with bulletproof vests. You think John Dillinger and all of the mafia is in that house. And it's some little 17 or 20-year-old little kid.
Or a 63-year-old grandmother.
That's right, man. So this kind of thing, as Stan said before, it's the color and that skin. Something got to be done to stop it. Right now, 368 blacks have been killed since January 1. That's 3 a day. And we don't hear about these new killings, and it's happening every day. And one of the reasons why we don't hear about people being killed every day, and they're being killed every day, is because of what's happening with President Trump. He's commanding or dominating all of the news. So the news that pertains to us and blacks being killed by the police is not making it to the front page because of all this juggy boogie with the White House. You know what I mean? And something got to be done, man, because I am afraid. I was born and raised in this country, and I've been in some of the baddest prisons you can go to, man. Maximum security, been in a insane asylum, been paralyzed, had a life sentence. Ain't none of that generate the fear that I'm feeling now. And it's not right to feel like this in your home country, and I haven't done a damn thing right. I paid for everything I've done, supposedly. I got away with a few things. I'm gonna keep it real.
Well, you know, we are fortunate that in this age of technology, people have videos on their phones. They can capture what's going on. The police officers are supposed to have their body cams on, so you can't hide behind the reality of what happens in many of these cases. Now, the police will turn their body cams off sometimes, and they will take as they did in the case we handled when I was with ACLU, they will take the phone, the video cameras of ordinary citizens who are trying to capture the situation. So there's some abuse there, but there are enough people who can use social media to bring the truth out. And now that we can do that, we need to change the laws. And that's electing people who have the backbone to change the law so that those protective laws that allow police officers to cast aside their fear and use their guns, without indiscriminately, can be changed. There needs to be changes in the laws in this country that protect those officers in their misconduct.
We're going to take a break and be right back. Joining us in the studio at Ben's Chili Bowl here on U Street, the world famous Ben's Chili Bowl on historic U Street in Washington, D.C. Our guests are Attorney Johnny Barnes, former director of the ACLU, the D.C. chapter of the American Civil Liberties Union. Kevin Copeland, retired D.C. police officer, been on the force for 20-some years. And my good friend Stan Mitchell did 38 years in the Baltimore prison system. We'll take a break and be right back with our conversation.
Dan, were you in the Baltimore jail?
Well, yeah, I did 38 years, and 8 months, 19 days, and 22 hours.
The Baltimore jail is a serious.
Yeah, Baltimore. I started out in Baltimore City Jail.
That's what I'm saying. That's a serious
Then I went to
institution.
the Maryland Penitentiary, then to the Jessup, then to Hagerstown. I did the rounds.
Yeah.
I had life plus 18 years.
But that Baltimore City jail is serious.
And like Roach said in the beginning, I literally was one day in the prison in the dormitory with 50 and over, the old man's dorm, and then the next day I'm downtown Baltimore with $18 and 38 for blood pressure medication with a pat on the shoulder, say we made a mistake.
Wow.
Have a good life.
But
But I have something I want to say about when you talk about the laws, right?
When you want to come in,
Come in.
okay.
Second, we're ready. Yeah.
4, 3, we're gonna come in now.
Okay, this is Roach Brown. We're back with Crossroads, coming to you live the first Tuesday of every month. We come live from historic Ben's Chili Bowl on U Street. WPFW is heard around the world. Your station for jazz and justice. For all the folk who want to call in, we don't have the phone lines hooked up here at the Chili Bowl so you can call in with a question or comment. The only numbers we have are the numbers for you to call to make a donation or a contribution to keep us on the air. Our guests are Mr. Kevin Copeland. How they feel sometimes. I got some friends who are all nationalities. I like people, and we don't if you like people, you're people. And when I see one of my people do something that ain't right, I'm gonna pull you up and say, man, what you just did, do that. When I see somebody hurt a kid, and it's not even my kid, I go to the Safeway or the Costco, and I see a lady snatch their little kike up and kill him, spike them and kick them in the, man, I'm gonna say something. It ain't my kid. Right's right and wrong's wrong. Because you're an adult or you got the thought, it doesn't give you the right to abuse. One of the things I wanted to hit on this morning was the difference. The law says equal justice under the law. All this morning you heard President Trump saying that he's above the law. He can pardon himself. When a cop kills somebody, that's 2 weeks ago we saw it on TV, he was allowed to stay off for 3-4 days before he gave his statement. Nobody I know of, when you kill somebody or suspected of killing somebody, when you're arrested, you have to give your statement. Officers are allowed to wait 3, 4, 5 days, talk to the union rep, and get their statement and get their story together. And it says equal justice under the law. How can they be treated differently than we are being treated? You know, we kill somebody, we go to jail. We don't, and they take an oath to serve and protect and to obey the law. And when you see somebody violating the law, and I'm a cop, I'm gonna say, man, that ain't what we're supposed to be doing. You know what I mean? So how do we, sure we can elect some people, but I know politicians who are afraid of the police.
Yeah, I think
They
so.
are elected. They are afraid of the police. So that's kind of fear that you say the cops feel, but you got people feeling fear from the police.
First of all, a lot of people don't know the history of the quote-unquote law. I mean, when these laws were written, we were not considered citizens. First of all. And number two is this: there's enough laws on the books to stop all this. The problem is equal enforcement of the law, and that's the issue. There's enough laws on the books. When I go down as a result of working with Justice Projects, I spend a lot of time in the Napa, and I listen to these people, and they pass these bills. Well, we need, right now, we need 20 years for this, we need 50 years for this. My point is that if the laws are not applied equally, nobody's going to respect it. There's enough laws on the books right now to stop all this foolishness. But if they're not equally and fairly applied based on how much money you got or what color your skin, you can pass laws till the cows come home. It's nothing going to be happening. They have to be, you need people that's going to equally enforce it. When a person comes in the courtroom and interact with the system, they speak one bland color, not what we can get this black law, we can apply this black guy, so we apply it this way for him. This is a police officer, we apply it this way for him. We're all human beings. If we find ourselves in the system, then everybody should be treated equally, not on your pocketbook and not on the car.
You know, something else about this law thing that I have trouble. I spent over 30 years of my life working in the law library inside of institutions, not continuously when I made several trips or vacations, so to speak. And you find the law, and the law says 1, 2, 3. But when you file a motion, it goes to the court. They say 4, 5, 6.
Well, let me. I wanted to comment on that, bro. You are so right, and you captured the inscription above the Supreme Court, which says equal justice under law. And they got it wrong. Those craftsmen got it wrong. It should say equal law under justice.
Say that again. Say that again.
It says equal justice under law above the Supreme Court.
Yeah.
It should say equal law under justice, because justice is the higher authority.
Yeah.
And it is law to stand your ground and kill somebody, but it's not just. It is law to use your weapon and kill somebody who's unarmed, but it is not just.
Yes.
So the Stan is right. We need to change how the law is applied so that it advances justice and not this misconduct of police officers. And that's what burns me about President Trump. He is missing the whole message. You know, first of all, he dodged the draft 5 times. He don't know nothing about patriotism. And they started paying them NFL owners to fly over, you know, and all the patriotic stuff. That didn't start till 2009.
Yeah.
Wasn't none of that till they started paying the NFL owners. So it ain't about patriotism. It ain't about the national anthem. It's about what Colin Kaepernick started out in the first place. Police misconduct, police brutality, shooting unarmed black men, and we're missing that when we get diverted by this discussion about other things. And so I don't know what the brother's gonna do in the NFL this football season, but the issue is more urgent now than it was when Kaepernick took his knee in the first place.
We're gonna take another pitch. It's that time.
I'm gonna give you $100. I don't know what Alan Burris gave you, Roach. I ain't got Alan
You give me
Burris.
1,000. You give me 500.
No, I ain't giving you. I'm gonna give you $100. I know that's why you bought me.
You know I'm coming for the money.
I pledged $100. I represent the people, right? I ain't one of them downtown lawyers. I'm the people's lawyer.
This is our annual, again, spring fund drive, and we need your help here at WPFW 89.3 FM. We cannot come to you unless folk make donations. People coming in the door making money. We need to bring a suitcase out. Look at this money coming through the door. If you're walking down the street, come into the chili bowl. We got a big old bowl for you to put your money in to make sure we get donations and contributions and stay on the air. Folk, please do whatever you can to make sure that we are on the air continuously. If you have any donations or contributions, if you're in the neighborhood, if you're at home, you can call 202-588-9739 or 1-800-222-9739. I'll repeat, 202-588-9739 or 1-800-222-9739. And we got a nice donation from our guest, Mr. Johnny Brown. That's $1,000. Is that
No, you got it.
Oh,
Ain't going to wonder talk that. Too many zeros, right? I ain't got that.
We got a nice donation from Mr. Anonymous. Thank you for Anonymous. We need your help. Please keep the money rolling in, because Bertine and I cannot come to you. And I said before, we've been doing this for 10 years. And I found it hard to believe that we've been coming in for 10 years and we only missed 7 times to bring this show to you. And the young lady who made this possible just walked in, Gloria Minot, her and my brother Hill. When Archie Childs passed away, we sat at the front and said we'd do a show. That was September of 2008. And that's been 10 years and we haven't missed a lick. Thank you, Gloria. Thank everybody for standing. But please, folks, if you're listening, all the folk who are retired cops, wannabe cops, returning citizens, or never been a citizen, whatever you are, make a donation and a contribution. Because folks, we're bringing stuff to you. First we had the Congresswoman from D.C. You might turn on our show. Last month we had the Attorney General. There's no telling who you would hear on this show. We have men like sitting beside me. He did 38 years and 4 months in prison. And he came out and he gave him $18 and a bag of medicine. Folks, these are real stories. This ain't no juggy boogie. We don't make this stuff up. We bring it to you as we see. We call it like, we give you the real skinny with no juggy boogie in it. So I want to thank my friends for being here. I mean, we're getting close to wrapping up. But I want to say before we leave, Kevin Copeland, the retired DC police. What have you noticed anything since you left the department about the brothers you left behind? Are they doing anything to combat or fight this stuff or get these other white officers to become more sensitive, to stop pulling their weapons soon they drop out of the automobile? What can we do to stop the killings? Or what have you heard from the folk, the cops who are still on the force? What are they trying to do? Or are they doing anything?
Well, I have encountered, because I have gone back into the police department as a citizen and trying to be a part of change. I realize change is not what you say, change is what you do. And we're trying to bridge the gap between law enforcement and community. So I get an opportunity to talk to the officers, and that's exactly what they're doing, Roach. They're trying to change the dynamics of policing. Community policing is what they're all about now. We're trying to really get the chief to understand that it's important to bring back community policing, so folks who do have fear or are in fear, they go out, they engage the community, they get to learn the young men, young women in our communities. We began to mentor. One of the things that I am definitely pushing for is our officers who are on duty, 30 minutes, stop by a school, elementary school, junior high school, mentor some youth. Come on out alongside us, what we're doing with Code 3 and Brothers and Sisters Keeper Outreach, and mentor, help us. We're pleading for the community. If we want to see change, we got to be the change we want to see by coming out, participating. Find some group, someone, somebody to participate to be a part of change.
When you want to learn a language you don't understand, the best way is immersion. You immerse yourself into, and so I think Stan had the right idea that every police officer needs to be immersed into the communities that they are going to patrol. You know, and break down those fear factors, break down those stereotypes. You know, you had an FBI agent twerking and his gun went off. Now, you know, he probably is not a bad police officer because he's relating to the people. So he was just having fun, you know. So we need to, all police officers need to understand and appreciate the communities. And when they go into well-off communities, you don't have problems like that because they assume different things. So I think immersion is, like Stan said, get them accustomed to these communities.
We are wrapping it up. I mean, the time is so fast. We got like 8 minutes to go. We give everybody a couple of minutes to give you closing comments. But before I do that, I want to say, I forgot to mention this when our guest Congressman Eleanor Holmes Norton was here. We lost a giant in March, and I'm surprised that we didn't hear more outcry or more support for this young lady. Her name was Dovie Brown.
Yeah, Dovie Brown.
She was a trailblazing, historic lady, a lawyer. As a woman and as a woman of color in the age when black lawyers had to leave the courthouse in order to use the bathroom and the water fountain. She dared to practice before the bar of justice went unflinching. She had white lawyers and black lawyers was afraid of doing the 50s and the 60s when segregation was heavy. She did not bite her tongue. She was instrumental in winning a spate of advances for blacks and women in mid-city America, blazing trails in the military, the legal profession, and the ministry, and one of the first women of any race to be commissioned as an Army officer. She worked with Mary McLeod Bethune and Eleanor Roosevelt. This lady also, Johnny, represented my co-defendant in 1965, and we had a murder charge. And she stood up and called them folk by their name. Frances Cress Wilson was called in, and she questioned Frances and brought out to the court why a doctor who lied on the stand and said he interviewed me 3 times. And Dovie stood right up and said no, and asked for the dates and specifics, and had caught this psychiatrist in the lie. And this lady represented people back in the day, and she got paid potatoes, pies, pork chops, because everybody didn't have no money. She took on homeless cases of folks who didn't have any money. And as a lawyer, she helped win that landmark racial segregation in interstate bus transportation that originated in '52, 3 years before Rosa Parks refused to give up her seat in the bus. So Dovie Roundtree is a giant, and I'm sad that the city didn't turn out to respect it. This lady has made a tremendous impact, and she was 100 and Our show, our guest has been Mr. Johnny Barnes, former director of the ACLU, the DC chapter in Washington, DC, and Kevin Copeland, a retired DC police officer we met a few weeks ago. Brother, I'm impressed with you. I like your style, I like where you're coming from. And I ran my inner voice up and down here. That's my record. somebody's love for their mother. Like the Congress said before, we're trying to get the law changed or the policy that when you go into the federal prison system, you can see that we allow two suckers, one for hello, one for goodbye, and if you sit there for 4 or 5 hours, and then you send him home in 4 or 5 years, and they call on daddy. What's going on? This meeting is about kids in this country. We're going to wrap up and say this is Roach Brown coming to you live from Venezuela until next Tuesday. Remember, your inner voice is never wrong. Merry Christmas.
Happy New Year. Happy holidays.
You just watched another show of Roach Brown. We want to thank everybody for tuning in. We want to thank everybody. Make sure y'all guys keep it here every Monday. Dr. Eve Taylor. Every Tuesday, Dr. Roach Brown. Make sure y'all guys continue to follow us.
Bless you.
I got it here, I got it, honey.
Okay, well, you know, whenever.
Wait, let me take Johnny Bones.